earn more money but too busy to start a side hustle? Do it the right way and teach your money to make more money for yourself, even when you're asleep. Dale Corpus will show you just how here on the School of Cash Flow. With his entrepreneurial mindset and extensive experience in real estate and finance, Dale will help you become a responsible, strategic, and passionate passive real estate investor. Learn how you can increase your earnings or find more ways to make money, only here on the School of Cash Flow.
Good afternoon and welcome to the School of Cash Flow podcast. I'm the host, Dale Corpus. I have a great guest for you today on this episode. He's also a Bay Area realtor and an investor. Similar to me, he's got a tremendous backstory. So his name is Abbas Mohammed, and I met him through my friend, Matt Kavanagh, who I've met through GoBundance. So thanks, Matt. If you're listening, thanks for the intro. Abbas was born and raised in Iraq, and growing up, Abbas recalls sleeping on concrete floors because his family couldn't afford to buy beds. Came to the U.S. At 11 years of age and decided to get into real estate at the age of 18, paying for the startup costs of getting real estate on his credit card, $5,000. And fast forward a few years later, in real estate, Abbas became one of the top 50 agents nationwide for RE/MAX in less than 5 years of just being in the business. And he wanted to invest his cash flow and decided to invest in multifamily apartments. And even within a year of doing that, Abbas invested in over 1,500 apartments. And he exited his real estate sales business and went full time into running model equity. And he has a goal of reaching $1 billion in assets under management in the next 5 years alongside investors. So let's do this. Welcome to the show, Abbas.
Thank you, Dale. I appreciate it, man. Thank you for the intro.
Yeah. For those of you, my guests that don't know you yet, where are you based out geographically?
So I live in San Jose in California.
Okay. Very cool. I lived in San Jose at one point, and I think we just chatted before this, and I told you I went to Santa Clara, which is right there. So I used to live in San Jose for a while. Just by way of introduction, I mean, everybody knows everybody in real estate. It's like you were introduced to me by my buddy, Matt Kavanagh, who I know through GoBundance. And I actually did a loan for him.
No way.
This year. Yeah, I did. I'm both a realtor and mortgage broker.
Right.
Like, how did you know Matt, out of curiosity?
Yeah. So what happened is him and his partner reached out through Facebook because they wanted, I guess they saw my profile. I wanted me to get on the podcast. So I went on the podcast and we did like literally a 3-hour episode. It was the longest podcast I've spoken on. After we were done with the podcast, they were great. They're very good at asking questions. So after we were done with the podcast, I had an event coming up. So I'm like, hey, you know what? You'd be perfect to speak at this event. Let's talk about real estate investing. So he came up, 2-hour drive for him, and he just knocked it out of the park. And so we've been kind of friends ever since. He's a great guy.
I like it. What's your story of how you even got into just real estate as being a realtor? Like, you were 18, you got into that business. Most people don't think, especially in the Bay Area, that I'm going to be a realtor at 18.
Yeah.
But you did it. How did that come about?
Like you said in my bio, I mean, I just grew up really poor. We didn't have money, we slept on concrete. And so I always hated the fact that we just couldn't afford to do anything. And so when I was 11, that's when I came to the US back in 2009. We were on food stamps, we were on housing assistance. And so I'm like, listen, the minute I could change this, I will do everything in my power as a person to get us out of this situation. So when I was 18 years old, I was selling cars. I was a used car salesman, and I was going to college. And I'm like, listen, I'm making money, but I know this is not the path for financial freedom. If I wanted to get my family out of the situation we were in, I had to do something bigger. And so I looked at different opportunities. And one of the things I noticed, and this was very interesting, most millionaires are made in real estate. In fact, 90% of millionaires are made through real estate. So I looked at that and I said, okay, so most millionaires are made in real estate. Some of the richest people in the world are made through real estate. So I could either go and think about what is the right path for me, or I can just do what other people that are successful, that have what I want, already are doing. And so I decided to get into real estate. I didn't know in what capacity, but I looked at different options of flipping, wholesaling, real estate agent. I'm like, at the time, I only had a $5,000 credit card. And I'm like, you know what? The thing I could afford to start immediately would be getting my real estate license. So I put it on a credit card, and I just decided to go all in when I was 18 years old.
What was your first year of real estate like for
I
you?
sucked.
Did you make it happen?
I'll tell you that. I was the worst. So here's the thing. When I got in, I quit college immediately, and I immediately quit my car sales job, which was dumb, but I was an 18-year-old kid. I didn't know any better. I thought I'm going to go in, I'm going to sell houses every week and make $30,000 a week, right? But I was quickly proven wrong. I literally went out. I knocked on hundreds of doors a day, literally from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening. I had a full suit on. I had the tie, all that stuff. Did that for 3 months, didn't get a single transaction. And so then I'm like, okay, well, there has to be a faster way. But I also ran out of money, by the way. My credit card tapped out. So I went back to my car sales job to pay the bills. And so while I was doing that, I'm like, hold on. I'm noticing there's a lot of downtime where I used to just talk to people and just, drink some water. Now, what if I could use it more productively? What if I start reaching out to people through the phone, right? And cold call. So I had two headsets on, and I would literally cold call thousands of people a day through my computer while I was not working with a customer. And so I did that for 12 hours a day. And I had to do it for pretty much a full year before I finally got one transaction. I was calling from the bathroom sometimes. I was calling from the rooftop of the car dealership to avoid seeing people. And I did that for a full year. I got my first transaction, paid off all my debt at the time. And then getting the second transaction was easier and then easier and easier. But throughout that first year, I mean, I wanted to quit so bad. But I got to the point mentally where I would like wake up in the morning just shaking out of fear of failure. And I'm like, should I be quitting? Should I go back to college? Should I just follow the, normal route? It got so bad mentally to the point where I'm like, look, I want to quit on something, but if I'm going to quit on something, I'm going to quit on the idea of quitting and just not leave myself that option anymore. So I made a commitment to quit on quitting. I was like, look, I'm going to be doing this until it works. There is no option B. And so I just stuck with it. Took me a year, got my first transaction. I sucked. I saw other agents would get in and they're doing transactions in a week or 2 weeks. I'm like, what the hell am I doing wrong? But
Yeah. You mastered the art of cold calling, it
I
sounds like.
did. I did.
Who did you call?
I called
Everybody and their
everybody.
mother?
Everybody that had a cell phone, that had a
Oh,
house,
wow.
I called. It didn't matter.
A lot of real estate folks are listening to this too. Did you
Yeah.
call like FISBOs for sale by owners? Did you call
I tried
buyers?
FISBOs and
Yeah.
expires, and I just hated that. To be honest with you, I didn't like the fact that we were almost. I felt like I was begging for their business, and I knew it wasn't something I wanted to scale up long term. So
Yeah.
instead, I called random people, asked if they wanted to sell their homes, and just kept the database going. And people that were saying, "Hey, I'm going to sell in 3 years." I'm like, "Sure, no problem. Let me write your name down," because I'm thinking I'm going to be in business in 2 years. I'm going to be in business in 3 years. It didn't matter, and I just kept building those relationships, with these people until it was time to sell. And then they started calling me back and saying, "Hey, boss, you're the guy that calls me every month about selling my house. I'm ready to go. Can you come over and take a look?" And so that's
Yeah.
what I did.
The gold's in the follow-up, right?
Yep.
It's like a lot of follow-up. I mean, any tips for folks that people here are in sales that are listening and stuff, even realtors and stuff? Is there a magic follow-up system? Is there a magic, like even a CRM that helps follow up?
I will tell you this. I've looked at a lot of businesses, a lot of agents. Most people don't follow up nearly as much as they should. People think that they're doing a good job with follow up, but most of the time they're very weak. I'll tell you this: I would rather lose customers because I follow up too much rather than following up not enough. So like we had a system where, and by the way, you need systems for everything. Like I need to make sure that there is proper procedures that is followed. I don't want to be following up on Dale because there's a specific scenario here and there's a specific scenario there where people have different treatments, because when you have thousands of leads, it's not scalable. So I wanted something scalable. So I would remember calling people. If somebody said, "Hey, I'm moving in a year," I'll call in 3 months. Like I'll cut it in fourth. And then we would send out weekly postcards. We sent out weekly letters. We left voicemails. We did text messages. And I lost people because they're like, "Dude, that's too much." But I'd rather lose those people. And then by the time that someone who's actually ready wants to sell their home, they knew us so well, it was like almost like a layup, because it's like they've known me for years. They see how we followed up with them.
That's
And
good.
that's
That
how I
makes sense.
scaled the team later on through that.
Especially for folks that are listening here that are in sales and whatnot. Like, what kind of where did you get your sales training from? To be very effective at cold calling.
Yeah. I mean, most of it was honestly just experience. I mean,
Kidding.
just
Yeah.
sucking on the phone until you just stop sucking, right? I mean, like when you make thousands of phone calls a day, at some point you're going to have so much experience with what doesn't work to the point where you're accidentally going to figure out the things that work. Like unless you're not even paying attention, you will figure things out. So that's kind of it. And same thing with presentation, same thing with everything else I've done. It's like I learn from other people a lot, but really nothing beats experience.
How did you have that explosive growth just being real estate for a relatively short period of time. Can you elaborate on how that
Sure.
happened?
So after my first transaction, getting the second and third and fourth transaction became much easier. And so by the time I got in at late 18. By the time I was 20 years old, I was making like 350,000, 400,000 a year. And this was right before COVID in 2019 because I got in 2017. So in 2019, at the end of the year, I'm like, listen, I'm making more money than I thought I would make by now. But at the same time, I'm working 15 hours a day nonstop and I'm not seeing my family anymore. I'm not seeing anybody. I have to change that. I also saw other people that were way more successful than me that were working way less hours. And what I realized is that successful people and businesses have three things in common. Number one is they have people. Number two is they have systems. And number three is that they have data. And so what I started doing is I started setting up systems to my business and I started hiring people. When I first started hiring, I wanted to duplicate what I was doing. I wanted to make multiple Abbas's. And by the way, later on, years later, I discovered I don't want multiple Abbas's. I want multiple Abbas's, but I also want other people that bring in other skill sets that I don't even have. But that took much longer to figure out for me. But the point is, I started hiring virtual assistants from the Philippines and other countries, started teaching them what I did, had them on the phone. And by the time COVID hit, I had 3 employees. They were producing as many leads as I was. And when everybody shut down and people were reducing their marketing, I'm like, look, this has to be the best opportunity for me to grow. So I hired a hiring manager. We went from 4 employees to 12 by the end of that year. I tripled my profits in the business. And then the following year in 2021, I actually took a more passive approach. I started paying less attention to the business because I had other interests, which is building the multifamily world. But I still did the same thing. We went from 12 people to 25 people by the end of the year, and I tripled my income again. So I just kind of tripled it year over year by hiring more people and getting them into the machine that I had already built.
That makes sense. I mean, so you had up like 25 employees. I take it that pretty much all of them, were virtual. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yeah. And I tried hiring in person versus virtual. I noticed that the production was the same. And so I just decided it wasn't something I wanted to do. But yeah, I mean, my first hire was a hiring manager. And then my second hire, I mean, when I say hire, I mean key hires. Obviously, I had cold callers, but my key hires, the first one was a hiring manager. Then I said, okay, well, we're hiring so many people now. I'm spending all my time training. So I hired a training manager. And then I'm like, okay, so now we're training people, we're hiring people, we're getting a lot of lead flow. What's the next step? And that was I hired salespeople. So the salespeople started following up on our leads. And so by the end of the year, my job was to just go on listing appointments. I would go on listing appointments and just get listings, put them on the market, and then I had people take care of that stuff too for me. I was a listing appointment machine basically. But
Did you have a big team of agents? Was it just
no, I
yourself?
was the only agent. I was the only agent.
That was
I was
crazy.
just cranking out listing appointments.
For all the staff that you had, how were you able to keep them all on board and be motivated to work hard for you? That's a lot of staff.
We did, yeah. I mean, we had KPIs, we had numbers
Yep.
we wanted people to hit, and if they didn't hit those numbers, we had conversation. I didn't have the conversations. I had a general manager who would fire them if they didn't. But yeah, I mean, it's like we had understanding of what the expectations were. I have a very high expectation of what I'm supposed to be doing, and so I want the people with me to have that same expectations of themselves. And you know what I realized too is that people that are good at work don't want to work with lazy people, and so that we just kept that mentality and people loved it.
Knowing that you built that out, I mean, like and it worked. If you were to rebuild it again, would you do any of that differently for a real estate sales business?
Yes, I would do it differently. And what I mean by that is that times have changed. I've noticed that cold calls are less effective, and part of it is because of the changing rules and regulations. And see, that's the thing in business. You have to be adaptive, right? If you're not adaptive to the environment, you're going to get washed out. You might figure something out that works for a year, 2 years, and then if things change and then you end up being watched out. That's why businesses fail all the time. So what happened is in last year, at the end of last year, Congress passed an act. They made it way harder for cold callers to call. And so we noticed lead flow started dropping. I knew that in 2022, I wanted to exit the business completely at some point. And so I'm like, look, there has to be a way out of this. I need to figure something out that's easier. And so at the end of February, we started transitioning from cold calling to online ads. And I figured out a system on how to do that. And so from there on, we just ramped up the online ad space instead. And so now our business is exclusively pretty much from online lead gen. And so that's been working out really well for us. And so I basically reinvented the whole business. It's not based on listings anymore. My entire business was based on listings. Now it's based on buyers. It's based on all that stuff. The nice thing about it is that it requires less skill. And so I was able to hire agents to take my job. And now it's completely passive. So it's just doing its thing on its own, which is really nice to see.
No, you've found a way to still keep the business still going, where you're not necessarily operating in
Yeah.
it, but like it sounds like you're getting leads and working with a team of agents to help them with those buyer leads that you basically are consistently receiving, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I have staff that follow up on the leads, that do the marketing, and one of them, is the manager for all the other ISAs. Same one that was managing my salespeople, and so then they pass the leads on to the agents once the leads are ready to go. And so it's all about building the right systems and having the right people in place. You know what I mean? One of the things I've realized is that you just can't do it alone, and if you do it alone, you're just going to make way less money than you would if you had more people on board. So I'm okay paying people, and I'm okay trusting other people. I think another big problem that most business owners have is that they just don't trust that other people are also capable, and so that creates issues in scaling.
Yep, I'm agreeing with you. I mean, I've been in the business for quite some time, and I always felt things that were like knowing what I know now. It's like one of the things that was holding me back from growth is that I don't trust as many people to do the job as well as I can do it, type of deal.
Sure.
I mean, that may be true, but the thing is, in terms of scalability and whatnot, it's not, you can't scale that. I mean, as you scale, yeah, you're going to lose some of the profits. But the thing is, your business is not going to grow if it's not expanding in general. And so It's like, it took me a while to grasp that mindset shift. And it's great just hearing your story and the fact that you figured it out like when you're, very young to be able to do that. It's just like a lot of people are like, I know there's 3 levels of business. There's always like, there's the me business. And people are stuck in that because they do everything themselves. And then when they start adding a staff, the we business, and you're still in and operating it, and still stuck in the grind, which some people still love, and there's nothing wrong with it. But it's like you look like you figured it out at an early age, and you've designed it to be a they business so that you could step out of it. And I love that because it runs itself.
It does, yeah. I mean, now at this point, I check in about once every 2 weeks. I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, what are the big things you guys are working on to continue to grow the business, to continue scaling it? But like we might set some goals, but besides that, like I might be spending an hour, 2 hours just meeting some of the key people in it, which is great. But one of the things I later on realized is that even building the sales business to what it is right now, I've realized I've always been how do I say it, like the smartest person in the business, and I was the guy that had the most skills. And now that I'm building a multifamily business, I've realized that that's not the right way to build a business. For me to continue to scale, I need to bring in other people that have skills and knowledge that I don't have myself, that I don't want to acquire myself, because otherwise I would slow myself down in the business down too much. So there's always going to be growth and how I do things, and what we're capable of. And so like I don't think where I could be yet, but having said that, that's one of the things I've realized now this year is like, look, man, there's so many other people that are way more skilled than I am. They're just not business owners, and they want to work in other businesses. And so I just got to acquire the right talent that brings in more information that I just don't have myself, because it takes a lot of time to acquire a skill and be really, really good at something. And I don't want to keep having to acquire those skills and then teaching them to other people in order to continue us growing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I know you mean, it's like, I could just tell like one of your unique skill sets is like, you're an amazing, like a systems architect.
I love systems.
Like, yeah, you build this stuff and you implement it. And it's like, because you don't want to fail, so you won't give up.
Right. No, there's no quitting. There's no quitting unless I die. There's no quitting.
So let's talk about real estate investing. And can I ask you, did you go directly to multifamily as your first investment, or what was your first investment?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if you count buying your own house as an investment. I don't think that's an investment necessarily. I do think if you don't own a house yourself, I do think owning your first house is probably a good idea, because you don't deal with tenants and you live comfortably doing what you want in your own house. However, beyond that, I ended up switching directly to multifamily. And here's why. So what happened is in early 2021, my business was producing cash. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do with all this money? I'm not a flashy guy. You won't see me driving an expensive car or you going to parties or any of that stuff. So I'm like, well, what do I do with all this cash sitting around? I looked at different avenues: stocks, single family homes, crypto, NFTs, all that stuff, right? And what I wanted is, I knew that I wanted to invest for the long term, say for the next 50 years, 60 years, whatever. And so looking at it that way in a long-term perspective, what I wanted to avoid is I wanted to avoid risk. as much as possible. Obviously, there's risk in every investment, but some are way more risky than others. And over a long enough time horizon, if you take on high risk over and over and over and over again, at some point you're gonna go down. And so I wanted something that can go up in value with as little risk as possible. I wanted it to be scalable. I wanted to get cash flow. I wanted to get appreciation. I also wanted to get tax deductions. And so after looking at many other asset classes, I saw multifamily was the best. So I started actively investing in multifamily. I invested in 1,300 apartments passively with other people. And then a few months later, I noticed that a lot of my clients want the same things. They want cash flow, they want appreciation, they want tax deductions because they want to build wealth for their kids, for their family. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing that for myself. Why don't I help other people do that as well? So I started buying deals myself actively. My first one was $6.5 million. We needed to raise 2 million. So I just reached out to my network and I raised money from my network, raised money from friends and past clients who wanted to be a part of it. And so now it's been a year since we bought that first deal, and it's doing so well. I mean, we went up in value, not value, but in net operating income by 38%. And so it's like, wait, I could do this on a massive scale. I could help way more people invest cash that they otherwise would just toss in stocks, which I don't believe in, or single family houses, which I don't believe in. And so I went all in. So we bought that first deal, and a few months later, bought a much bigger deal. It was $30 million. And then this year, I switched my focus from selling houses and building the sales business to building a multifamily business that helps other people invest.
Now that I know that your first investment was basically an LP investment, right?
Correct.
So how did you even get into that? How did you even know about the space? I'm asking that because even we're both, realtors, and even a lot of my realtor friends don't even know what that stuff is and what syndications are. Like, how did you get educated?
So originally, I mean, I've followed a lot of syndicators before that. People like Grant Cardone. I mean, he's done it at a very, very large scale. Although his focus is on a slightly different type of asset. He goes after newer stuff, lower returns, but that's whatever. But yeah, I mean, I found out about it back in January or February in 2021, and I just started investing. I wanted to get that experience. I wanted to see what it feels like to actually invest in those syndications, and I wanted to see the results for myself first. So I started investing passively with other people, and then after doing that a few times, I'm like, okay, well, now I could start doing my own deal. I felt comfortable enough to know what I'm looking for, what I want to avoid, the type of communication I want to have. And so that's how I started doing it actively.
Okay. So, tell me more about right now it's like, right now your group is focusing on mainly multifamily and is there a specific area? Is it multiple areas? Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So our selection process is very specific. What I want is I want to be investing in states that have positive population growth. Population growth is my number one criteria, because if you look historically at the areas that have had the best appreciation, it's always the areas that have had the most people coming in. Because when people come in, they don't build houses fast enough, they don't build rentals fast enough, so rent prices go up, housing prices go up. So that's my number one criteria. Is I want to see population growth. The second criteria I have is I want to see a state that is landlord and business friendly. So I would never invest in California as an investment vehicle, and especially in multifamily. I would not be in Oregon. I would not be in Washington. So I avoid states like that. I want landlord friendly. The third is I want to see high projected rent growth, and that's related to population growth. So rent growth. And then the fourth thing is I want to be in areas that have had proven historical appreciation. Meaning, if I think Dallas meets all of my criteria, have they also had historical appreciation? Have they also had historical rent growth? Because I don't want to just work on future projections. I want to work on past projections. If things stay the way that they have been in the past 10 years, are we still going to be good with these investments? So that's how I choose a state. Then comes choosing the MSA and the neighborhood. And so for that, my criteria on that is very similar to the state, because what happens is sometimes you might choose Texas as a state to invest in, but not all of Texas is a good place to invest. Some pockets are good, some pockets are bad. So I want to see population growth in the MSA that I want to invest in, whether that's Dallas, San Antonio or Austin or any of these other places. These are all great places to invest. And then when I get down to the neighborhood, I want to choose neighborhoods that have high median income. So I don't want to invest in low income areas, mainly because you tend to have more problematic tenants, you get less rent. If you want to increase rents, you have more problems. So I want to be in well established areas. I don't like invest. There's two types of people: people that invest in established areas, and then you have people that invest in areas that are up and coming, as they say. I don't like up and coming, because it's like, what if I put all my money and my bet on this area growing, and then it ends up not growing, and then it ends up being the same way it has been. So I like to be in the established neighborhoods. And then whenever I see a property that I like to go visit in person, and I look at it, I'm like, hey, would I feel comfortable being in this neighborhood as a person? Would I live here? Would I live at this property? Would I live in this neighborhood? And so that's kind of how we choose properties. So if you go on my social media, you'd see I'm flying all the time to different states.
What are your favorite states right now and areas that you're buying in?
So we've been buying in Dallas. That's my number one market, hands down, no question about it. My second favorite market, I would say, is Nashville. Nashville has had tremendous growth, lots of people moving there, lots of rent growth. So Nashville is my second favorite. I really like Phoenix and Tucson, although one thing to note is that Phoenix tends to not do very well during recessionary times, historically speaking. So that's one thing that I kind of keep in mind. I really like Florida as well. Florida has been tremendous. Tampa, Jacksonville, Orlando, these are all great markets. I would say out of Miami and markets that are like that, because they're a little overpriced, but the rest of Florida is doing really well. So those are my top states. I also thought about investing in Georgia and Atlanta and whatnot, because the numbers make sense. Everything makes sense on paper. But then I visited and I started talking to normal people about what they feel like living there. And a lot of people were complaining about crime. And so, and they said that the state is anti-police for the most part. And so there was a lot of high crime. So I decided to stay out of that. And since then, that's been about 8 months now, we're starting to see rent growth go down, population growth go down, because people are feeling the exact same way, where it's like, hey, there's too much crime. They don't want to live there anymore. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is you want to invest in areas that, again, low crime, higher income, high population growth, landlord and business friendly. And those states tend to usually be right-wing states for, whatever reason, but that's just the way it is.
When you started off, how did you start deal flow? I mean, what did you do to, break into these areas?
Yeah. So the best way to get deals, especially as you move on to larger units. When I say larger units, I mean like 50 units plus, which are, in my opinion, the best types of investments to make, because then you get better management, you get better vendors, all that sort of stuff. So 50 unit plus is what I focus on. To some people, because like, well, I don't have the money to invest in a 50 plus unit apartment. It's like, no, you can invest as little as 50,000 or 75,000, whatever the amount is, right? And you can just become a small owner in a larger property. But the way I started getting these deals is by building relationships with brokers, because brokers have the best deal flow. You don't see these deals online, by the way. You'll never see them posted on, like, how we have the MLS. They don't have that in commercial. They have some websites, but they're not active that much. So the best way to get these deals is to build relationships with brokers. And when you continue to establish those relationships and they trust you, they trust that you could close on these deals and you could perform, then they start sending you off market deals. So that's kind of been the biggest way. I mean, just not too long ago, I flew down to Dallas just to go meet a broker over dinner. We had dinner and then I flew right back. And so, like, I'm willing to do that to build those relationships. I flew to Tennessee literally for a few hours just to meet two brokers, met with them, built that relationship, flew back. And so I'm willing to do that because it works on trust. It's a very relationship heavy business.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if somebody doesn't have a track record, like, as even when you first started off doing it, and you didn't have a track record, how did you get even the attention?
Yeah.
Of an experienced broker? It's like a lot of times they won't even talk to you.
Yeah. So, and it's funny you say that, because that was a challenge getting that first deal, because, like, look, you've never raised money, you've never closed on a deal. How am I going to trust you on this deal? But, thankfully, because of my background as a real estate listing broker prior, I knew what they wanted to hear to gain that confidence. Because when I spoke with agents, when I was an agent myself selling houses, I'm still licensed, but I'm not active, is I knew what I wanted to hear from the buyer's agent for me to feel comfortable getting my seller to take their offer. And so I just switched positions. And so when I spoke with them, like, I know this is what they want to hear. This is what I'm going to say. And that's how people trusted me. When I was doing my second deal, that $30 million deal, the broker was like, dude, I mean, it's much bigger than your last deal. You don't have a proven track record in this market. So to get that one was very difficult. But after I got it, he's like, listen, I'm going to award you this deal. I'm going to put my name behind yours on your offer. If you mess this up and you don't close, I just want you to know you're going to make me look very bad and you're going to hurt me financially and my reputation. So we will never be doing business again if you don't close this deal. And by the way, I do half of the business in this market. So if you mess up, it's probably not even worth it for you to keep going in this market anymore. But if you do close the deal, then we're going to do as much business as you want because I have a lot of deal flow. And it was 3 months of almost living through hell because it was the most difficult time in business I've had at that point. But we closed it, we performed, he was super happy. And then since then, we've been getting so much off-market deal flow from the guy. It's just been insane because again, we've built that relationship. And so now when I want to get new deals with other brokers that don't know who I am, I'm like, listen, just talk to this guy. He could vouch for us. And so that's how you build it. It's like a spider web where it's like, oh, well,
Yeah.
these people have done business with them. Let me get references. And then your network continues to grow.
When you're discussing with brokers and whatnot, and what you're looking for, what's your quote unquote your buy box? What criteria do you tell them?
Yeah, same. I mean, same criteria I shared. We want to be in higher income neighborhoods. So if it's a low income neighborhood, I don't want to be there. Ideally, we want to be in deals that are 1970s plus, so built in 1970 or higher. We want to be between 10 million to 30 million in terms of price range, just because I believe those deals are better to manage, they're easier to manage, and there's better returns. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Oh, and they have to have value add, meaning like I don't want to buy a deal that I can't force the value to go up. So we want to be able to go in, renovate units, or increase income in some capacity so that I could increase the value of the property.
Okay, that makes sense. And like I know that on real estate sales, the side of when you're doing real estate sales, you were the only agent, but like what's your team structure now look like as you're running this multifamily investment business?
Yeah. So in this business, there's three bottlenecks that I noticed. Number one is getting deal flow. Number two is raising equity. And number three is managing these assets. So the number one problem I wanted to solve is building the relationships and underwriting deals efficiently. So my first hire was an underwriter. So I hired an underwriter. I started building those relationships myself. We started getting deal flow. So the second issue right now that I'm working on is how do we go from raising tens of millions of dollars a year to raising hundreds of millions of dollars a year? Because my target is to get us to $1 billion. So I need hundreds of millions a year. So now the second thing I'm hiring for is I'm hiring people that could help us with the equity raising. And so I have multiple, actually, literally, I just got off an interview with somebody. So we're hiring people for that role. The third thing that I'm going to start working on in about a year or two is building a property management company to take all these properties in-house and managing them in-house. But in the meantime, I have my partner. He's been in the business for 35 years and he's managing these assets and he's doing really well. But we can only extend that for so long before he becomes overextended. But my biggest focus right now, so I hired an underwriter. My second focus right now is hiring people to help us with the equity raise.
Got it. Like, question on your underwriter: was the underwriter already experienced in underwriting, or is this something that you transferred your skill set to?
Yeah,
to virtually. I don't even know if it's a virtual assistant.
Yeah, so this guy, he's French. He loves business. He actually had his own business in the past, so he had a lot of complementary. Because when you're buying multifamily, you're buying businesses, and if you could improve the business, then you make money. So he had that skill set because he had a business in the past. And the thing I liked about him is he's very analytical because you have to be very analytical with multifamily. But to answer your question, I did train him myself on what we wanted specifically and how I underwrote deals because every company underwrites a little differently. I'm very specific about what we want. I'm very detail oriented. And so we were able to train him in the way that I want things to be done. And so that's been extremely, extremely helpful. And so that actually helped us avoid buying deals when other people were buying deals in the first 5 months, 6 months. The market was crazy. Everyone was buying deals. I thought it was a bad time. So we didn't buy anything, but he came to the same conclusion because he underwrites the way I would underwrite. And so we've built a really good working relationship as a result of that.
Speaking of underwriting, I mean, how many deals are you underwriting before you find a deal that looks really good to you?
Yeah. Ideally, we want to be one deal out of every 100. I mean, when I say 100, these deals take 2 to 6 hours to underwrite, excluding the time to fly to them if I'm actually interested. Because there are many cases where I fly to a property, I'm like, nah, I don't feel like this is the right deal now. But in this year so far, it's been 400 before I got one. Because the market didn't make sense to me. So I literally underwrote 400 deals before we put any offers out, and we ended up getting one, but it took much longer. But in the future, I want us to, reduce that number to 1 out of every 100. But again, I mean, it's going to depend on the market. And so if the market is overpriced or the deals are overpriced, I'm not going to buy, obviously,
Yep, I know. One of the bottlenecks you had mentioned also was in asset management. What's the breakdown of that? That's also like property management as well, correct? And that's
Correct.
got it. You're trying to bring that in-house
That
eventually.
in-house, yeah, because I mean, it's easier to hire third-party companies when you have, say, less than 2,000 units. Once you cross about 2,000 units, then it just becomes a little more of a headache to deal with, different a third-party management company when you could just bring it in-house, have direct employees that could, report directly to you. And so that's what I'll be bringing in-house, hopefully in about a year or two.
You like working with newer investors that are new to this space to get them comfortable with even investing in syndications.
Yeah.
What's the process like if you're working with a newer investor that has no idea what a syndication even is?
Yeah, I mean, first off, we start with education, lots and lots and lots of education. So I have I host a lot of events in the Bay Area for those that are local, but some of my audience is not local. And so, we do webinars. I do a webinar almost every week or every 2 weeks. We host a free webinar. I also have a free ebook that people can download. It's like 30 pages where they can read about multifamily syndications, what the market criteria that we have, why do we have such criteria, how do we find deals, what deals do we look for. So it just teaches them about the whole thing from start to finish. What happens, once we find a deal and you invest, what happens next, right? What's the process like? So lots and lots of free education to get people comfortable and understanding what it is that's actually happening. And then I also give them past case studies of, look, these are the properties we bought. This is the performance. This is what's going to happen. And so, people need to feel comfortable with what they're doing before they take action. Because if they're confused, they don't take action. And so we provide a lot of free education.
What challenges do you see as the biggest challenges right now in the multifamily space?
I think the biggest challenge right now, in my opinion, and always has been, is sourcing good quality deals. Because what happens, especially right now, is that a lot of sellers are becoming afraid of selling right now because the market is way more in favor of buyers. And so what's happening is we're seeing less deal flow on the market. So that's been very challenging. And so my job is to just stay on the phone with brokers and, continue to source these deals. And so that's what I do all day long now, basically. That and obviously raising equity. Sometimes people get a little afraid of the market and whatnot. What I notice is that sometimes people are investing when everyone else is investing. And the market is frothy when they should be doing the opposite. And so like the first 5 months of this year in 2022, people were investing like crazy, but I was looking at it. I'm like, look, this is not the right time, I don't feel. And so now that the market adjusted when everyone should be investing right now, because it's a great buying opportunity, I see more and more people sit on the sidelines, which is why we do a lot of education to get people to understand how I'm thinking and why I'm doing the things I'm doing. And I go all in on these properties. Like we're investing just as much, if not even more than our investors in all these deals.
Okay, no, got it. I mean, with talks of a looming recession and whatnot, is there anything that you're doing now in preparation, of that, whether it be in underwriting or just general? It's like, what are your thoughts on all that stuff?
So I do believe we're going through a recession. I believe interest rates are going to continue to go up. Stocks, as a result of that, will continue to go down. If you've lost money in stocks and you're hoping that, look, I'm just going to hold on to it until it goes back up, you might as well just sell and reinvest later on, because I can promise you it's going to continue to go down as interest rates continue to go up. That's number one. The second thing is, in my opinion, I would say multifamily is going to continue to go up in rent, because what happens is as interest rates go up, people can't afford to buy homes anymore. So we're seeing this actually at properties we have where rent growth is off the charts because people are having to rent longer and there's more competition, there's more demand. So what we're doing is we're being very conservative in what we expect to happen in terms of rent growth and all that stuff. Like if the market is seeing 25%, we're underwriting 5%, right? Yeah. So that's one thing. The other thing is every deal we buy, we underwrite it. When I say underwrite, means evaluate. We evaluate the deal as if the market was going to go down. So like I might be buying a deal at X evaluation, and then I'm like, okay, if we keep it at the same income, I want the evaluation to go down 15%, 20%. So the reason I do that is because I want to underwrite if the market goes down 15 or 20%, can investors double their money? And that's the expectation I will set into every deal. And if the market doesn't go down 20%, then we will do way, way, way better than projected. However, you never want to be too risky. So I always like to underwrite deals as if the market is actually going to go through a recession.
Makes sense. Like, and typically for financing, I mean, are you, what kind of loan to values are you typically
Yeah,
underwriting?
right now we're using 65%. We don't want to be highly leveraged. So 65% is what we're doing. My number one criteria when I'm buying deals is I want to make sure we preserve capital. Obviously, there's never any guarantees, but I'm putting my name and my money into these deals as well, alongside everybody else. And so we want to make sure that we preserve capital first, and then growth of capital is secondary. But obviously, it's very important that we grow the capital.
Some final questions for you. What are you excited about in your business right now?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm excited to get the message out to more and more investors, so that way they see the alternatives that they have rather than investing in stocks all the time, and 401ks which are going into stocks, where people are a lot of times they're just not happy about it, but they don't see any other options. So I really like hosting a lot of these free events because it gets people to see the other side of what's actually possible. I mean, some of our investors, in the deals that we've got, are based on the deals that they invested in, based on what's going to happen to the market, the NOI and all that stuff. I mean, they're going to make way more money than they ever made in stocks. And so to see that and to be able to get that out to more and more people really excites me. And also building the company, I like the fact that we're building a much larger company this time than I did in the sales business. There's more opportunity. It's a bigger industry. And so I just like the growth aspect of it personally.
And any big goals that you're working on in the next 12 months, personal or business?
12 months from now, I mean, I want to hire more people. I want our team in the multifamily business directly to be at least 5 people, where it's in the underwriting and the capital raising perspective. My biggest focus when I think about goals is I focus mainly on 5-year goals, and lifetime goals. But my 5-year goal is to get us to that $1 billion. And so anything that doesn't help us get into that $1 billion goal, I just cross out. Like any other business opportunities, and I've had plenty, any other ideas, I'm like, nope, this doesn't serve our target. So I need us to stick to that. So my $1 billion goal in 5 years is really my biggest focus.
Yeah, it's like you're very laser focused.
I'm very laser focused. Yep, I don't want to get diluted.
What do you feel is your superpower that's contributed to your success so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think being laser focused really has been it. I mean, when I know I'm never going to be the best at everything, but I know if I stick to the things I'm good at and not get influenced to go 100 different directions, I could produce way better results. And so like our focus right now is just on multifamily exclusively as an asset class. And my focus personally is to grow the business and not focus on other businesses or other opportunities or other ideas. And so I think that's been the biggest thing. I also spend a lot of time learning new skills, and I think that helps us a ton as well. But yeah, I think it's a combination of those things. Another thing I would say is, and I've developed this more when I got into the multifamily business a year and a half ago, is I've been very analytical, because when I'm reading through hundreds of income and profit and loss statements literally day in and day out, it helped me become way more numbers oriented and way more analytical. And so that helped me make better decisions for both my multifamily business and my other sales business when I was actively in it, because I started seeing things through a different lens. And so that helped us grow much faster.
Any final words or advice to the audience as we're wrapping up, and how can somebody get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, learn about investing, learn about multifamily and other asset classes. You want to make sure that you invest in the thing that is right with your long-term goals. But education, I think, is very important. I think a lot of times people invest in whatever is the easiest. And what's the easiest thing to invest in? Stocks. And so that's kind of where all the money gets channeled in. But there's way better opportunities out there. I just hope that more people would spend some time, because that could, I mean, if you get 7%, 8% in stocks, but maybe you could get 20% in real estate passively, then you could literally think about it in a 20-year perspective, 30-year perspective, 50-year perspective. If you get double of what you normally are getting, you're going to, there's a compounding effect, and you're going to have much, much, much bigger results as you continue to scale. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my biggest piece of advice, is just spend more time learning. The easiest way to get a hold of me is to just email me, Abbas, Abbas, at modelequity.com. That is MODEL equity, EQUITY.com. Abbas at Model Equity.
All right, awesome. We'll appreciate you having you on my show.
I
Thanks for your time.
appreciate that. Well, thank you for having me on. It's been fun.
Yeah. So again, thanks for sharing your story and inspiring us with your hustle and drive. And it's Boss is a young guy, but you can't tell. It's just like he's got such a hustle. And I love how big you think, and you're very passionate about what you can do, and you're very laser focused.
I appreciate it.
I picked up that. Takeaways. You're a master at building teams and systems. And heck, I just talking to you makes me want to improve some of my own systems. Now.
I love it, man. That's awesome to hear.
Like you work with virtual assistants to like a level that I don't know if I personally know anybody that has. You've had 20 plus virtual assistants at one time. It was awesome. Anyway, thanks again. And to my listener, feel free to reach out to Abbas directly if you have any questions for him. And also thanks to you for checking out this episode of the School of Cash Flow. Feel free to leave me a podcast review on iTunes, as it helps me attract even more great guests just like Abbas. So until next time, live life abundantly.
Love it, man. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the School of Cash Flow. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into all the tips and tricks you can use to help you on your passive investing journey. In the meantime, you may visit www.cashflowschoolpodcast.com for more great episodes. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share. That's all for this episode, folks. See you next time.